This game is terrible. The movie, while nothing special, at least had its moments. So what's the problem? Let's get into it in 3, 2, 1. You play as the T-850, a cyborg from the future that is tasked to protect John Connor and Kate Brewster. Your mission is to defend them at all costs before Skynet's evil Terminator, the TX, wipes them out of humanity's fate. The confrontation between these two cyborgs is formed with this hand-to-hand combat. It is clunky and stiff as it looks. She is a capable fighter if your attacks are off-range, which means beating her must be taken with a careful approach. Just move closer, mash the punch and kick button like there's no tomorrow, and it's over. You fight her at least 4 times, and although you can throw her at your leisure, there's little variety. The whole thing just makes you wish that it was better than it could have been. And sadly, that's not the case. So how about the FPS segments? Well, this third level begins with one of the most annoying escort missions. On top of having to protect John from getting harmed, you cannot kill the guards. Had a tranquilizer or a sleeping gas of sorts have been implemented, this will be a breeze to go through, but instead, you have to knock them out with your wonky fist hoping that they won't get the best of you. Luckily, I was able to pass it on my second try, but calling this awkward is certainly the right description.
No, he's still standing! Suspect hit! No, he's still standing!
Moving on, this next mission is actually awesome. When you're mowing down cop cars with this beast of a machine gun, it definitely makes you feel like a badass Terminator. It's easily one of the best parts of the game despite being rather short. Can't say the same thing about these next two. Your objective here is to obtain an access card in what ultimately feels like a hallway shooter. Nothing more. But wait, it's then followed up by yet another fight with the TX. This time she really went all in before I barely got the upper hand. It's like almost every hit you make, she bypasses them until you nearly outdo her. Now I'm stranded at an airbase so I can collect electrical parts for this helicopter. You know, because the T-850 had to shut itself down after being corrupted from that fight. Once I'd entered each office, encounter more machines, and found all the pieces, I finally catch up to Crystal Peak before having one last round with this chick. Like last time, she went all in before I managed to outdo her at the last second. Mission accomplished. You sacrificed your life to put an end to the TX, John and Kate survived Judgment Day in the desolate future, and that's the end. Wow, the conversion from movie to game is one of the shortest experiences that I've ever played. I cannot believe it. Seriously, what the f- Now this is actually the first level of the game. The minute I started to turn around, the sensitivity was so slippery that it was almost unplayable. Immediately, the controls were botched, and it created a terrible impression on my playthrough. It's a good thing that there's a lock-on mechanic for compensation, which, in the context of who you're playing as, makes sense. Once I got used to the poorly tuned movement, shooting enemies felt laughable. While the sound effects are right at home, shooting these Terminators with your standard rifle can result in them falling back like cardboard cutouts. Like what? That might not seem like a big deal, but small incongruities like these can really track some of its negatives instead of the positives. Which brings me to my next issue, level design. As linear as they are, many of the areas were confusing to get through at points, whether it be because I mistook a wall as a doorway, or the radar just being broken as it is, snapping back against your will. I'm not kidding. Aside from the bad visuals, I constantly found myself wandering around aimlessly, only to stumble upon a tight corner that was leading to my next objective. That is a load of bullshit! And speaking of objectives, most of the levels consist of you and the Resistance fighting your way to Skynet's time displacement chamber. There's 13 missions, and almost none of them felt distinguishable than the last. I get that this is supposed to be a post-apocalyptic world, but surely there's intrigue to be found in other similar games. It's not until I reached the last 3 missions where the environments felt a bit interesting to glance at, and that's because I was inside of Skynet's base. This time you activate switches to open up entrances, disable security systems, and fight more machines than usual. After clearing everything, I finally reached the time displacement chamber so I could be transported back in 2003, right where we should have started. Yeah, Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines is one that felt like a missed opportunity. Despite 90% of the game taking place in the future, which is basically an extended version of the movie, there's no incentive to replay them. While the CG cutscenes look decent for its time, the gameplay can be rudimentary and downright repetitive thanks to its formulaic mission design. If you've seen the film, then everything else is going to feel familiar because later on, it actually starts showing clips from the movie itself. Might as well watch the whole thing on Blu-ray. The graphics? Heh. Even by 2003 standards, this game almost looks like an early N64 title. Almost. The music? It's generic and forgettable, minus the Terminator theme that plays in the end credits. As far as bonus content goes, there's your typical concept artworks, behind the scenes footage from the development team, and 2 bonus games that I unlocked via cheat codes. I've never played Centipede before, but man is it a fun arcade classic. It's simple. You're this insect-like creature that's trying to shoot down this centipede that comes from top to bottom. Eliminate all its remains and you advance to the next level. The higher the level, the tougher it gets, especially when you have a scorpion and these mushrooms that act as your obstacle. It's a welcome bonus, and honestly, I love it. Missile Command is an early example of a strategy game. You shoot down incoming missiles that are entering your airbase. Once your projectile reaches your crosshairs, it will burst an explosion that will last for several seconds. If timed properly, you can destroy them all at once, and boy is it challenging. Your ammunition is limited, which means you have to be so careful and precise. Needless to say, I didn't get too far, but nevertheless, it was worth the shot. There's also a demo for Terminator 3 Redemption, a game that I haven't played in over a decade. I might revisit this in the future someday, but who knows? Who knows? If there's anything on how forward-thinking Rise of the Machine was, is that it runs on a 720p resolution, at least on the Xbox version. But since the average Joe was playing it on a tube TV using composite cables back in the day, it hardly mattered. Given that this coincided with the movie's DVD release, you'd think the developers had enough time to polish some of its nooks and crannies, but at last, it is what it is. A bottom-of-the-barrel movie tie-in that belongs back into the wasteland.